Hello, 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 sociologists. It's time for Social Movements, lesson number 18. Hope you like my hat. It's very tall. The learning goals for today are you're going to know about the outcome of the Dakota pipeline protests. And I know that we've kind of alluded to it a little bit, but eventually you're going to find out. It's still ongoing. It's still in the courts. Yeah. And you're going to be able to use evidence. So, the response to the Dakota pipeline protests. In response, so remember the protesters were trespassing illegally on private property, but you often find that social movements break laws because a lot of the times one of the things they want to change is that law. Okay, so what did the people do? There were heaps of arrests, pepper spray, armoured vehicles. Now, bear in mind that Dakota pipeline protesters themselves were not violent, so the fact that they were, there was violence done to them is questionable. Security guards using dogs on unarmed activists. So, yeah, that's not nice. And to involve dogs, come on. Man and woman's best friend. Not fair. They set up a campsite because they stayed there for years. They set up a campsite illegally on this private property where the pipeline was being built, and those buildings got removed more than once, I believe. So what we're looking at here is the Wikipedia page about the Dakota Access Pipeline protests. Now, if nothing else, this just shows how awesome Wikipedia is. There's no other encyclopedia that's going to have this much stuff about the Dakota Access Pipeline. You have a look, there's a whole section about all the different protests and the reactions to them. There's about the court. So here's the background to it, all the environmental background. And a lot of photos that are put on there as well. The camp, the youth groups that were involved. There's an outline about the specific protests that took place. Security firm use of dogs and pepper spray, that's an important one. There were some high profile arrests there. A lot of famous people went as part of the protest to get arrested to raise awareness. And then you've got all the toings and froings between police and protesters. Then there you've got the court case between the tribe and the engineers who were trying to build the pipeline. And then here we go, so it continues on and on. There's a wealth of information on this Wikipedia site. Any case study that you want to look at, go to the Wikipedia page, you'll find heaps of stuff. So here we go, prosecutions of protesters at the federal and state level. And then there's a whole section about their online presence with the hashtag #NoDAPL. And that's specific supporters, and then here's all the reactions to the protests. And then they in fact went to the UN eventually, and then there's a whole list of other things that are related to it, and a massive amount of references. So anybody or any teacher who tells you that Wikipedia is not reliable is straight up wrong. So said Mr. Lawless. Here's a video about what took place at the Dakota Access Pipeline protests. The world needed to see what was going on.
If it wasn't for Facebook or social media, then nobody would know about our story.
Morning, relatives.
On November 2nd, Sempaweli 20 went live on Facebook to urge participation in a prayerful river action.
Everybody's good though. Everybody's in prayer though. We got a couple actions going on. One by the bridge, one by the river.
So that he and fellow Standing Rock activists could cross a creek to reach sacred native land.
You feel it. You feel the tension.
What are you doing? Your water is under attack!
Stand up, fight back!
We're here to pray. We're just here to pray.
This land is where the Dakota Access Pipeline is being built.
It's scary because to shoot rubber bullets at these people that are completely unarmed when they took an oath to protect them.
Police used pepper spray and rubber bullets to disperse them.
You got hit? Josh!
Oh my God. Did this guy you?
Get a medic! Get a medic! Get a medic!
Police were given authority to arrest those who crossed the creek for trespassing.
We have to use our phones to just show our side of our story.
Put your weapons down!
Social media has been a good tool for us to provide the right information and communication with the outside world. We're able to connect with thousands of people instantly What happened on October 27th was a big day for me just because that was the day they took over the frontline camp. It was hard to even witness it, but the world needed to see what was going on.
Law enforcement forcibly removed Native Americans and allies from their encampment on the pipeline's construction site.
They went in there and they beat up a lot of relatives. We had grandmothers there. They shoved their grandmothers around. They dragged their grandmothers around.
More than 200,000 people have watched Isha Hofer's live video from October 27th.
We have our cameras and our prayers. That's all we have.
It is because of social media that this movement has grown.
Native people from hundreds of tribes have vowed to continue their movement and to tell its story on their own terms.
I was raised with the stories that we are the stewards of this land. So we have to protect the water like our ancestors did. We have to protect the land like our ancestors did.
I'm here for my kids, my grandkids, because I want to make sure that everybody's children's safe, everybody has a chance to drink clean water in their lifetime.
I hope only for peace, that we're able to come to an agreement to stop this pipeline.
This is not just a Native issue. This is an American issue, and Americans should be aware that this is happening.
Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.
Video number 2 today is about the court ruling that the Dakota pipeline must be closed down. So we know that Trump closed it down, then, Obama closed it down, Trump opened it back up again. But in 2020, it's actually been closed down again, because they need to do more environmental impact assessments. Rad. I mean, I should be neutral. Who knows? Clearly I'm not. The third video, this one here, is just about the judgment, so check this one out as well. It's a short one.
What is your reaction to the federal judge's ruling that you've been fighting for so many years?
Well, I think it's a step in the right direction. It's something that we've been always putting in front of the judge, this argument that this pipeline isn't safe and our people have a right and we should be heard. The pipeline, when it was granted, violated federal law. We always knew that, and we're just thankful that the judge is starting to see what we've been saying all along for the past 4 years. It feels good. Today's a good day, and I know it's not over. I know that the EIS process still has to take place, but it's a step in the right direction where we get to hopefully be a part of the EIS process, the environmental impact statement process. Our tribe should be included in every step. Our technical team and our experts should be presenting our concerns all along the way. That's what's needed in the future. But for now, it is a good day to finally know that there is a real threat to our humanity, a real threat to our environment, and right now, with the judge's ruling, with the flow of the pipeline stopping and being empty, that threat will be gone temporarily. But we have to be included in the process to continue and express our concerns.
The judge's order requires them to go through the full environmental impact studies that they failed to do before. It leaves open the possibility, the judge is finding, that at the end of all of that, the Army Corps of Engineers could issue an approval. But Joe Biden, if that does run its course, if that is legally allowed to run its course, it is very likely that it would be next year after we may have a new president. And Joe Biden has said that he would support the tribe on this and he would not allow this pipeline to reopen there. So this is one of those cases that in the end may be decided by the presidential election, as it was last time.
Yeah, and that's one of the main reasons why it's so important that Indigenous peoples are peoples of this country get out and vote and express their concerns and why we need to have a voice. So it's very important that we're a part of this process.
And explain to our audience the route of this pipeline, which is when you're out there and you see it, it's so extraordinary. It makes a certain visual sense when you see it crossing the land, but it actually goes under the lake. This very large lake that your tribe has always lived with as both a sacred place and a very necessary place to daily life. It's the pipeline under the lake that the judge was especially worried about.
Yeah, it's a project with this magnitude, this size of a project. It doesn't warrant just an environmental assessment, especially if there's a population that has concern. And we've always had a concern, but it seemed like we never were heard. So when our youth stood up and started speaking out, saying that, we have to think about the future of our nation, the leadership stepped forward, and I commend the leadership today for continuing this fight to make sure that a project of this size and a threat to our nation, not just the Standing Rock Nation, but to the United States, goes through the proper legal processes and reviews. And that was our argument from the very beginning.
4 videos in one lesson. It's just serious video fest. It's like a short film festival. Remember going to the movies? Anyway, pipeline shutdown. Check this one out.
How about Dakota Access? That was a very unfair situation. And, I approved it.
Who are the people that run the world? It's not some shadowy secret society. It's the very people you'd think. Politicians, the ultra-rich, military contractors, monarchs, media moguls. Hi, I'm Sean Morrow, the host of Who Is the Podcast, the first podcast from Now This and iHeartRadio. On Who Is, I'll dive deep into the fascinating lives of the people who run things, those whose decisions impact every aspect of our lives. How did they get where they are today? And knowing that, what might they do next? How do they use all this power they've accumulated? From Vice President Mike Pence and Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi to Chief Justice John Roberts and whatever it is Jared Kushner does. On Who Is, I'll introduce you to the reporters and experts who know these real-life world molders best. Sharp-eyed observers and confidants who work with, follow, and examine our subjects every day. For more, hit the link below or search Who Is on the iHeartRadio app or wherever you get your podcasts. Also, don't forget to hit up the Who Is Snapchat, YouTube, and Facebook pages for the series playlist to check out all the video episodes you may have missed.
Okay, so this text is in pink. You don't have to write it down. We're just going to have a, well, I would say discussion, but it's in one direction, not the band. So let's apply everything we've learned about sociology to this case study, which we're going to do with Me Too in some upcoming videos. Right. So it's a social movement that wants to produce social change. Yeah. The social movement is stopping this pipeline. What's the social change that it wants? Well, firstly, it wants the pipeline change stopped. That's a political and environmental change. But you could also say that it wants an ongoing change of, allowing, having environmental and indigenous Native American voices more prominent in decision making about this kind of stuff. So yeah, what was the change? They wanted, which of those three was it trying to do? Well, it was definitely trying to resist change. It was trying to resist the pipeline being built, so it was trying to stop a political change. But you could argue it was also trying to change society and doing what I said earlier. It was by trying to involve environmental concerns and Native American voices into the decision-making process, not just big business and the government, for once. Is there any link to the big three social changes? These ones here. Yeah, there's a slight link to all three of them. Urbanization. Lots of Indigenous Americans don't live in urban areas. Not that they all do. It's the same with Indigenous Australians. Don't. That's a myth that they all live in rural areas, but there's certainly a high number of them that do. So, pipelines that are being built in rural and remote areas are going to affect those people more because that's where they live. Industrialization. Industrialization is the automation of the whole world's economy. And what is the main energy source for that? It's the black sticky stuff, oil. So yeah, definitely related to that. And of course, globalization. Oil production and the oil market is a hugely globalized world marketplace, and it's crucial to everything that takes place in the globalized economy. So there are the links there. Are there links to any other factors? Sociocultural, yes, I would say the continued ignoring of Indigenous voices. Historical, similar. Historical treaties between the Standing Rock Sioux and the governments of the time were not, they were broken. Economically, yep, there's definitely a link there. You would say the decision to build the pipeline arguably puts economic concerns over environmental concerns. The other E, environment, yes, it's having an oil pipeline in the first place is there to use and burn more fossil fuels, which is bad for the environment, but it also was possibly going to harm the local environment through, if there was a leak in the pipeline, it would damage the Mississippi River. Political, yeah, it goes to the heart of political decision makings. Who gets a say? How is the process done? And technological, yes, also a link, because the technology involved in building the pipeline. So there you go. You can generate a lot of thoughts about an issue just by thinking about sheep. Is it explained by deprivation theory? What was deprived? Not really. You could argue that the Standing Rock Sioux were being deprived of their land. Yeah, it would kind of work. Is it explained by the New Social Movements theory? New Social Movements theory is kind of all about disillusionment. This was a straight up environmental one, I guess. There's certainly a little bit of the aspect. I think I've got some dot points here. Yeah, here we go. Disillusionment. So I would certainly say there's something to be said about movement culture being useful. Quite a few, I don't want to call them professional protesters because that's what the far right like to call them, but there's quite a few people who are, you know, active in a number of different social movements who gravitated towards this big protest. Yeah. Continuing on our application of sociological concepts to this case study. What type of authority did the government have? Was it traditional, rational, legal, or charismatic? Well, this is quite interesting. The government had rational, legal authority. I think you could argue that the Standing Rock Sioux had traditional authority. I mean, they were the traditional rulers of the area before the settlers turned up. In terms of who anyone have any charismatic authority, well, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, aka AOC, I don't know if I pronounced that right, but anyway, she was on the protester side, and she's very charismatic. Check out AOC speech on Google, on YouTube. She's a beast. Was their power legitimate? Well, the government's rational legal power was this is why whether power is legitimate is an interesting question, because the protesters didn't feel that their power in this instance was legitimate, which is why they protested. What media and technology was used? So the protesters used smartphones to record stuff that was going on the ground, and then they uploaded that to social media, and that massively broadcast and amplified their cause, and they attracted way more adherents to it. The US is very politically divided, and so it played to the Democrat left progressive side much more than the right conservative side, I think would be fair to say. Was direct action? What direct action was taken? They physically set up a campsite where the pipeline was going to be built, so the pipeline could not physically be built, and so the engineers couldn't actually do the job. That was the direct action. What typically environmental strategies? So remember, environmental strategies are like they're into artwork, narrative, drama, ritual. I personally don't know enough about it to have anything interesting to say about that, but you might. Continuing on here. So what type of movement was it? Was it trying to modify individuals or transform society as a whole? I think it's fair to say it was just modifying and group behaviour. It was just trying to stop something that the government did. Was it limited or radical? It wasn't radical, it was just trying to stop a pipeline. So I would say it was limited change. So, and you know, welcome to humanities. There's no correct answer here, but I personally would say that it was an alternative movement. How was power used by the protesters? Authorities, private security, etc. The protesters, their main power was gathering more support. They wanted the weight of numbers, hoping that lots of people would contact politicians, and maybe if there was any groups to boycott, I don't know. How did the authorities and the private security used it? They used the legal powers. The authorities used legal powers. There were court cases and arrests. How did the private security used it? Tear gas, dudes with dogs. You know, this is very different to what would be acceptable in Australia. The idea that private security guards were fighting against protesters. You really wouldn't see that in Australia, I don't think. Well, prove me wrong. It'll probably happen in 5 years. And what type of authority did the government have? So, I think we already covered that. Okay, the activity today is all about using evidence. So, I want you to find evidence for each stage, right? You're going to need to do some research for this. So the 5 stages are 4 stages are those: emergence, coalescence, bureaucratization, and decline due to one of those 5 reasons. You will need to, if you can't remember what those stages are, then you need to go back on your notes and find out. I want you to write those 4 things: emergence, coalescence, bureaucratization, and decline, and put in a piece of evidence. Find a piece of evidence. Find some facts or information from the internet and put it beside that. Yeah. And we're going to do that with the Me Too movement very soon as well. Reflection activity. You're going to do a SWOT analysis. So, the Dakota Access Pipeline protests. What were the strengths? What were the weaknesses? What opportunities were there and what threats were there? You can write it in that grid or you can do it on lines. Doesn't bother me. Make sure you do this in pen in your exercise book. Yeah. Ooh, a different shade of green. The excitement never ends in Mr. Lawless's sociology class. Ooh, we made it. It's homework time. Okay. Read these pages. There's a practice example in there as well, a really, really awesome high-level one. And you're going to do the vocab quiz. Bit.ly, year 12 sociology words. That is it, my friends. Thanks so much for participating in this lesson, and as I always say, keep it real.